Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm glad to have you. If you're coming back, thank you for stopping by. I thought today we would talk about what it means to be an advocate as a nurse. I'm a nurse. So I will talk to you about what it means for me to be an advocate and to advocate for my patients. It is important that we be the voice for our patients when they cannot be the voice for themselves or when they don't know how to be the voice for themselves. It's important to make sure that their needs are being met, that they're safe, that they have what they need for their care. And on the flip side of things, you can advocate for your patient and understand that they still have the right as people to make decisions that you don't necessarily agree with as a nurse. I don't know how many times I've gone to bat for a patient because I think I'm a very passionate nurse. I probably irritate my colleagues sometimes. I really, when I feel passionate about something, will go to bat for you and I will fight for you. With the doctor, with my manager, with my teammates, I will speak on behalf of my patients. I think our patients don't often know what's going on behind the scenes and what kind of things that we are doing behind the scenes to make sure that their needs are met. I have had situations where a patient is in need of a certain service, in need of a certain treatment, and maybe it's approved all the time, but I'm still going to ask and I'm still going to try to get what my patient needs. Another thing is that we're mandated reporters as healthcare workers in general. Any job where we are public servants, we are mandated to report if something is not safe for our patients. And that's part of advocating too. If you see something that is unsafe for your patient, whether that be in a situation they're living in, a person is being abusive to them, not giving them their medications, there's many different forms of abuse that people don't really think of as abuse. If you're withholding money from someone, that's being abusive. If you're controlling their finance, that's being abusive. If you're not allowing them to maybe see the members of their family that they want to see and you are isolating them, that is being abusive. As nurses, it's our job to pick up on those things and advocate for a better situation for our patient. That being said, there are times whenever you are in home care and you're going to advocate for your patient and you're going to do the necessary steps and nothing's going to change. And that's something that you have to learn as a nurse, that sometimes even when you do what's right and you do what's expected of you, sometimes nothing's going to change, because sometimes our patients are perfectly comfortable living in those situations. And I'm not talking about abusive situations where a person is being beaten, because I really do think in those types of situations that APS or whatever would step in and take action. What I'm talking about is when a caregiver is maybe not cleaning the home or leaving the patient in bed for hours and hours, not turning them and repositioning them, not feeding them in a timely manner. Those are all forms of abuse, and we have to report those things accordingly. And we can't just report something. You have to actually look into it and see, how is this affecting my patient's life? Is it dangerous? Is it reportable? And you have to involve other people. You can't just go on your own and do this. You really have to involve other people. And sometimes your social worker and your chaplains have some insight, but your social worker is really your greatest teammate in home hospice, because they are a strong advocate and they are a strong voice behind you generally. I have been in situations where patients have been living in a situation where I thought it might be best for them to not live in that situation. And steps were taken, actions were taken, and nothing changed. The patient continued to live in that situation. Patience. It's happened more than once in my career. Sometimes what you think is best for the patient is not how the patient feels they want to live their life. And you have to move on and accept that and just make sure that you can make it as safe as possible. I have been in situations where a patient wasn't getting the care they need, and then it's our job as an agency to step up the cares that we can provide and to see what we can provide as an agency or outsource to our patients so that they can get that care that they may not be getting. And there are sometimes extenuating circumstances in families, and the patient has guilt associated with that, and they're not. They're not going to do anything that's going to be damaging to their loved ones. And you just have to accept that. And sometimes being a nurse in home care is really challenging because you're going to come into situations where people are living in a way that you probably don't live, that you maybe don't live. You're going to come into situations where there might be infestations of different types of bugs or rodents. You might see animal feces on the floor. Maybe there's a lot of animal hair around. Or maybe, sometimes we come into situations where a person lives alone and they don't have resources or help to take care of the things that they need to take care of in their home to make their home a safe place. And that's another situation where advocating comes in. And again, I have found that my social workers have been the biggest partner with me as a nurse in advocating for my patients and what they need, especially when you think about safety issues and cleanliness and things like that. Sometimes people are living in situations that they don't have control of because they don't have the ability to do it themselves and they have no one to help them. And in that way, I love working for hospice because a lot of times we can provide help that they may not have access to in other situations. And I'm sure there's things that home health can provide too as a home care agency. There are agencies in the community that will help people that need help. And sometimes people just don't have access to those agencies, know who they are. And when you involve someone like hospice in the home, our social workers are a wealth of information, and our chaplains too. And sometimes somebody that's on your team has knowledge of an agency or a resource that you may not be aware of. That's why it's so important to talk as a team about the things that your patient needs. We have interdisciplinary team meetings about our patients to discuss not only if they're appropriate for hospice, what kinds of things are going on, but we also bring up those things that are needs. Now, if it's an immediate need, obviously we're not waiting until an IDT meeting to bring up those needs. But as an advocate, it's important to speak up for your patients and make sure that you're providing the things that will help them have the best care possible and the most successful treatment plan possible and make them have the safest experience. Sometimes a doctor isn't going to agree with you. Your colleagues aren't going to agree with you on what you're seeing. And then it becomes a matter of involving other people to take a look at what you're seeing and make sure that they can corroborate what you're saying. It is challenging sometimes as a nurse to not involve your emotions when you're caring for people. The one thing that I will say to you is that it doesn't matter to me where a person's at in life. Even if I don't agree with what they're doing or how they're living, I am very passionate about my patients and I want to make sure that they're safe. And it is really challenging for me as a nurse not to get too emotional about it if I feel that need is not going to be met. And sometimes there is nothing that we're able to do to meet that need or make that change. Like I said, sometimes it's not going to change even when you go to bat for someone, even when you report something. Sometimes it's not going to change. But I hope as nurses and healthcare workers, that does not deter you from doing what's right as a person. As nurses, we're going to encounter people that we don't agree with the way that they're living. We don't agree with what they're doing in their life, and we're not going to live their lifestyle. But we still have a duty to give them the best care as any other patient, to give them the same level of care that we would give to a person that probably is living a similar lifestyle to what we would agree with. You're going to encounter people that you don't agree with, but you still have to advocate for them and make sure that they're safe. And you also have to recognize when a person is safe and comfortable in an environment that you don't agree with. I have taken care of patients that don't live in a home. They're not living in a standard home, but they're happy and they're safe and they're clean and they have a roof over their head. And you have to put your feelings aside about what you think about how a person should live their life when you're a nurse. And I think in that way, I'm advocating even now. I'm saying as a nurse, it is important that when you look at someone, that you're not looking at their appearance, that you're looking at what you can do to help them in the best way possible. And also understanding as a nurse that sometimes when we do give help, the patient's not going to listen. They're not going to do what's recommended. They may not follow the guidelines, but you're still going to keep trying, right? You're still going to keep providing education. You're still going to be there as a nurse. And I'm not suggesting that you should go into a situation where you feel unsafe, because I will tell you, we also advocate for each other. If you are in a situation where you're going into a person's home and there's something dangerous toward you as a nurse, you also have to advocate for yourself, and hopefully your teammates will advocate as a team to not send people into dangerous situations. When you go into someone's home, you never know what you're going to encounter, and it's important to know when to ask for help, when to say something. You always say something. You know, maybe nothing is going to change, but maybe people didn't know. People didn't know what was going on. You know, sometimes you come into a situation in home care where there are unsafe situations around you, and you just have to be aware of that. Maybe consider taking another person with you. The thing about doing home care, if you want to work in home care, is that you're going to encounter situations that may not be an ideal situation. You're not always going to go into the neighborhoods that you feel safe in. But I will tell you, as a hospice nurse, I've been in lots of neighborhoods and I've never been harassed or hassled. I've been in neighborhoods where there have been homeless people. I don't know if it's just my ability to just walk in and fit in, or if it's just that it's important to go in daylight hours. But unfortunately, as a hospice nurse, sometimes you're getting called out in the middle of the night, especially if you're an on-call person. Advocate for yourself. Don't just advocate for your patients, advocate for yourself. If you feel unsafe in a situation, absolutely talk to your team about that. Absolutely talk to your managers about that, and escalate it up as you need to. I have been really thankful and really lucky that I've always worked with really good teams who have listened to what I have to say and have all been able to brainstorm together and find a solution to the problem. There have been times, though, when I was really sad as a nurse. You know, sometimes we see codependent situations where we want to help a patient we want to do things to make their life better and to provide that assistance to them, but they're living in a codependent situation and that's all they know. That's the only thing they know, and no amount of your trying is going to change that situation sometimes. I have worked for companies that have gone above and beyond for people. They have said, if you do A, B, and C, we will do D, E, and F. We will do this for you, but you have to meet us in the middle. And had given them many opportunities in some cases, and it didn't change. And I have had to do discharges on patients at times, simply because they were going to continue to choose to live in an unsafe way that would be maybe potentially hazardous to workers, and that would make it unable for us to continue to provide care. And that's a hard thing as a nurse. You don't want to ever turn your back on your patient. You want to be able to do what you can for them, but there are times when you're not going to be able to change the situation. Again, that's just the biggest thing. You know, you want to change it, you're going to report it, you're going to go to bat for your patients, but you also have to understand that sometimes your patients are going to continue to live the way they've been living, and or their family members are going to continue to do the things that they've been doing. And in those situations, you leave it in the hands of who you reported it to, and you have to bow out sometimes, and that's really hard as a nurse who cares. Again, I have had a hard time as a nurse not emotionally having a feeling about it. I think in another video I want to talk about the types of patients that have made me the most emotional, or the most challenging patients that I've had. This was something that's just been on my mind about how important it is to advocate for your patients. What are some things that have been challenging for you as a nurse, as a care provider? What are some things that made you uncomfortable, that you did report, but nothing changed? How did that make you feel? Did you feel defeated? Did you feel like what you did was pointless? Because sometimes I know that's how I feel. I feel sometimes very defeated as a nurse, but I still continue to go forward and be a nurse because this is what I really want to do. And there are days when I question why I wanted to do this because of situations that can't change. But I love having a team that will sometimes put it into perspective for you and remind you why you're doing this job. So I would love to hear about your circumstances in the comments. I would love to hear about situations that you've experienced in your roles that made it challenging for you, that made you feel challenged as a nurse. Let's talk about it in the comments. If you like what you see here, I'd ask you to consider liking, subscribing, and following. And I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.